Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 30,000 members. In this episode, we look at the work of POA members working in high-security mental health hospitals, which are part of the NHS. I met with POA representatives for this sector as they gathered in person for the first time in 3 years, in the midst of a consultative ballot on the government's NHS pay offer. My listeners, with me around the room, for the first time in 3 years, I think, on a face-to-face basis, we have representatives who work in the secure health sector, and I'm going to allow them to each introduce themselves.
My name's Karen Henry and I work at Rampton Hospital.
Hello, my name's Martin Handley and I'm also from Rampton Hospital.
My name's David Wally and I'm from Ashworth Hospital.
My name's Lorraine Lewis and I'm from Maisie Care Trust.
My name's Gary McKendrick and I work at Carstairs State Hospital.
Hi, my name's Alan Connor and I also work at Carstairs State Hospital.
Well, you're all very welcome to the podcast. This is unusual work if you look at the range of jobs that are in the UK economy, if you look at the range of occupations represented by the POA. But how did you get into this? And how long have you been doing it? It's not for everyone, that's for sure.
I got in it first, generally because of job security. At the time in nursing, there was a general, there was loads of nurses and you were only getting really 3 months and 6 months contracts, whereas at Carstairs they were offering a lot more job security. The terms and conditions available there were very good, so that was the main reason for me at that time to look after my family and that. I've worked at Carstairs for 28 years now, so it's been quite a long time, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea about job security and a relatively good rate of pay is something that featured in many of your decisions to get involved.
Very much so.
Yeah, me personally, I came into mental health nursing probably due to family ties. My parents were both involved in working in psychiatric hospitals, so I kind of grew up around it. I kind of volunteered for organisations helping mentally ill patients be rehoused into like community settings. And when I finished my A-levels, I thought I'd become a nurse and kind of followed the family kind of line into mental health, really. So I started my nurse training in 1988 and I've worked at Ashworth Hospital, formerly Park Lane Hospital, pretty much since then. Not really looked back.
So, and Karen, how was your journey into the profession, as it were?
I started at 18 and I started working with challenging behaviours, but they'd been repatriated back into where we were from, because I'm originally from Barnsley. So we had patients that came from Rampton back into Barnsley. And at the time, when we were talking and things like that, I mean, I were a one-parent family and I needed a new washer. And I heard that the money were good at Rampton Hospital. So I thought I'd go for a short time. And I'm still there today. But I also went because of the pension scheme, because the NHS had a really, really good pension scheme at the time.
And I think, Gary, that's not a million miles away from your journey into this as well, is it?
Yes, initially I would say that, I took on nursing just because I was unemployed. I'd love to say it was the dream job, but it wasn't quite. I kind of stumbled across it for the reasons. I was unemployed at the time. It was more of giving this a go. It's something, if I'm being honest, I wouldn't have seen myself there long term, but that is 21 years now and it has given me good job security, and actually through the years found myself really enjoying my nursing time.
I think it's fair to say that all of you have got significant lengths of service in what is a very demanding role. So whatever the routes into it, you don't stay unless it's something that you've got an aptitude for. I think, and I can see lots of, as it's a podcast, you can't see all the nods around the table, listeners, but there are, that's virtually uniform nodding. I suppose the next question then is what are the sort of jobs that POA members do? And I know there's been a big change here, because whereas in England particularly, there was a kind of hub and spoke arrangement for mental health, with the advent of NHS trusts, I mean, Lorraine, you were telling me that your branch covers 247 sites.
We have 247 sites in our trust with members on all of them. And the job titles that are involved in there follow the whole range of nursing job titles. And we also go from high secure mental health to care in the community, district nurses, perinatal teams, rehabilitation, those type of areas. So we're no longer just mental health, we're physical health.
And the POA representation is across that whole spectrum.
Yeah, because we are a recognised union within the NHS. And we also have members who started, say, in high secure 20 years ago, but since then they've moved up the ladder, but they've also moved out. So you could get somebody who's become a charge nurse, but a charge nurse in medium secure or district nursing, or a charge nurse in rehabilitation. So they don't necessarily change their union membership. They take that with them.
Goodness, I mean, the thought that immediately comes to my mind is, how on earth do you organise a branch meeting? And the answer is with difficulty, I'm sure, but we'll come on to that in a moment. But if we're looking at what most people would think would be the POA's main involvement, which is in high security mental health, how do you get into that? Are vacancies advertised? Do people apply, or are people tapped on the shoulder and said, have you thought about doing this? How does it work?
To be fair, every single hospital or clinic in the NHS is recruiting constantly.
Yeah.
So I don't know any of our sites that don't have an open banner on the front door saying we are actively recruiting. So I don't know anywhere in the NHS nationally at the moment where they've got all the nurses they want. They've got all the HCAs they want. They've got all the specialists they want, because they haven't. One of the biggest issues that we have to deal with on a daily basis, and I would say 9 out of 10 times why a member comes through the office door or picks a phone up to us, is because of the safer staffing numbers. And I will guarantee you that whatever the issue they come in with, when you begin to unravel that issue and unpick the threads that go into it, it will always come back to safe staffing numbers and not enough staff on the wards.
Yeah, is this a problem that others are having to deal with as well?
We probably, it's a new concept for us at Carstairs. We're still a single site service. So for us, we only really started having problems regarding staffing was about 3 years ago, to be honest. Before then, we never had any issues with staffing. So in the last 3 years, and really since the start of COVID, it's probably exacerbated that a bit in terms of our numbers. Recruitment retention isn't great for us at the moment either. However, I don't think we're probably as bad a place as down south is.
Yeah, at Rampton, we're in the same situation as Ashworth. COVID's created a massive knock-on effect. The amount of nursing burnout throughout the NHS as a whole has had a massive effect. The clap was lovely, but it doesn't buy you a bag of bread or a bottle of milk. And unfortunately, all that has also had a knock-on effect of staff just giving up. They don't want to do it anymore. They leave. Well, the people that are left have got to pick that up. That's then burning them out. They're going off sick and everything. That then has another knock-on effect, and it's continuous.
And I think this is reflective of the NHS as a whole, seemingly undervalued and underpaid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Definitely.
there was a big issue, wasn't there, a few weeks ago, where it was one of the high street cafes, Petit Manger or something. They pay more than a qualified nurse to serve coffee. And that qualified nurse has gone to university, has got all the debt that goes with getting a degree, because you have to be a degree nurse now. You say, well, you can go and work in a cafe in the high street and get more money.
Yeah. If you take a look in the NHS, a couple of weeks ago on the 1st of April, we had the new budget come in, and we raised the national minimum wage. So to combat that, What the NHS did was they awarded our lower paid staff 1 pence an hour more. So they were able to say, we pay more than the national minimum wage. So they awarded them 1 pence an hour more than the national minimum wage. And that came into play on the 1st of April. And for me, I just think it's an embarrassment, isn't it? You know, we've got this institution called the NHS that is revered across the world. And that's what we think of the staff who are shoring it up at the moment.
In terms of the stuff that POA members most frequently have to deal with, there are some distinctive features of that, aren't there? How does those resourcing challenges and the demotivating effects of that and the exodus that generates in terms of stuff, how does that impact upon the relationship that, say, POA members may expect to have with their patients?
I would say that it takes a lot of stamina and a lot of care and a lot of loyalty to work in the NHS, whatever job title you've got. And your patient will always come first, no matter what, because you are taking a wage from a caring industry. So you have to care, no matter what your job title is. I think we fall into a trap where we talk about perfect care, and what we forget is that every single member of staff is somebody else's service user. And we forget that care extends that way as well. So we look at perfect care for our own patients, but we forget that all of our colleagues are somebody else's patient. So perfect care should extend to them.
We are in the care industry, we are our own worst enemy, because, you know, society doesn't actually know, and this is throughout the NHS, not specific to our area, we get on and do. We have really bad staffing issues, and we have done for years, but we get on and do, because these people need our help, they need our care, they need our support. Yes, we've got low staffing levels, but we actually rally together as a team and get on with it, because we're not getting the support and help from anywhere. We are the ones that have got to do it. So we do, and we don't complain massively about all the trouble that we're going through, because who's going to help us? There's no magic wand.
And I know, especially for us, and I'm sure everybody else is the same, if they're honest, as staff, we go without ourselves. So we forgive our breaks, you know, so that our patients still get what they need. So if we're really short, but our patient wants to go out on an activity or something, many staff give up their breaks to make sure that the patient gets their activity what they're due to. And I'm sure that's the same at Ashworth.
I mean, one of the saddest things for me as branch chair is the week before payday. That's the saddest time of every month for me, because I would say between 7 and 8 out of 10 phone calls that I answer is directing paid staff to the nearest food bank.
Yeah.
And then at some point during that month, as a chair, I will use branch funds to go and purchase some food and donate it to the food banks that we've used that month to service the staff. We began this conversation talking about reasons why we all ended up in the position we ended up in within the organisation of the NHS. And yet, here we are now. Now, it wouldn't buy your washing machine. You'd have to work bank shifts to get that washing machine.
But as well as those very real, very pressing issues, the resourcing issues, of course, some of the patients you are looking after and caring for have exceptional needs and challenges in terms of their behaviour. The question that many people may ask is, you must all see things in your day-to-day work that to people on the outside would be shocking, haunting, traumatic even. How do you square the circle of normalising that as part of your everyday work?
You can't normalise it. It's not normal. And that's the problem we have, is we're imploding on ourselves because we don't put the right support structures where it needs to be.
Mm.
You know, we've got staff at this table that will tell you they've been there for 30, 35 years. Imagine what they've seen and what they've had to deal with. Even if it's only 5 years or 1 year, it doesn't matter. We've got staff who've had to deal with this, and where do they go? Where do they offload it? What support is available to them?
Years ago, it used to be that there was plenty enough staff, but it was a different ethos, you know, stiff upper lip, toe the line. Nowadays, it's very, very different. We're burning out. So PTSD hits you harder because you're already mentally stressed and strained, and you find it difficult to keep at bay what you used to be able to. So you actually are affected far quicker and far easier with PTSD. Where we used to black humour, where we used to actually laugh things off because that's the way you do it, you're not allowed to do that now. It's not liked within the NHS. So you have to be very regulated of yourself, of how you actually show these things, because it's deemed as inappropriate.
Yeah.
And I think at times you do hear laughter on the wards, and that is seen as people enjoying themselves. But we're not. It's a coping mechanism. And, a smile to each other or just a bit of a laugh can go a long way when you're having a difficult shift. And it can diffuse some tricky situations as well. And I think, personality is every mental health nurse's best asset. Because I think as mental health nurses, we all have a personality where it brings out, like Martin said, black humour, but it's a way of coping.
Yeah. I think staff and members generally are good at adapting to the circumstances that they find themselves in. Some of them are very challenging, it's very difficult circumstances, but they just make it work, however that may be. And in terms of, you spoke about earlier around the challenge between relationships with patients, that's very challenging, especially during COVID, to be able to maintain that and to be able to continually assess their mental health. So that's been very difficult during that period.
Because the structure of the provision of mental health services is different in Scotland, are the challenges faced by colleagues who work in England, are they replicated in Scotland, or are they in some way lessened or ameliorated?
I think, listen, we've obviously came to this meeting for numerous years, and I think usually in England they are probably 6, 7, 8 years ahead of us, and we usually get it at the back end of things. It doesn't sound, they sound a lot worse for English special hospitals than ourselves, maybe because we're in a one-site hospital, it's a bit easier for us, but we still have our challenges, but it doesn't sound quite as bad as Ashworth and Rampton, to be fair.
Are there other things that are distinctive to the roles you all play within the union that would surprise your fellow POA members who work for HMPPS?
We follow what's called a just and learning culture. So as POA reps, you really do have to earn your money, if you like, because you've got to learn to be able to support resolution. You've got to be able to look at things. You look at employment law upside down, because if you're following a just and learning culture, you can't go running straight to policy and procedure. Policy and procedure is at the back end of what you're going to do. So you have to be able to sit down with members and management and talk your way through an issue. And you have to use your skills in communication to get people to understand that there was mitigating circumstances as to why somebody done something, because nobody gets out of bed in the morning and says, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to have a bad day today. I'm going to I'm going to go into work late, or I'm going to do the, do you know what I mean? We don't do that. We generally all want to have a good life. But sometimes situations overtake you and things go wrong. And it's trying to, as a POA rep, you have to get into a senior leadership team for them to understand that the human side of error.
And do you find that the senior leadership team that you're dealing with gets that, understands that, is supportive of that? Or is it, you have to bang on the door for a long time and very loudly?
I think it depends on the people within the senior leadership team that you're talking to. So the higher up the ladder you go, the more understanding you get. But the further down the ladder you come with your senior leadership team, because it's a very lengthy process, they don't have the time to do that process. So they'd rather just hit you with a breach of policy or something because it's quick and it's easy. But it doesn't solve the problem.
I think some of the misconceptions out there around us is that we work for the NHS, being a big one. Some people don't think you work for the NHS. I think the front line, we're all nurses or AHPs or part of that profession. I don't think they think that either, the general public or other people outside the service. And I think for us in particular, it's the ethos around partnership working. I think partnership working works really well in Scotland in particular. It certainly does for us at a local level. And I think partnership working I think they're focused upon that to go forward. Now, I think they understand that is the correct way of working. And I think they've just sort of really clicked over that over the past couple of years, to be fair. So I think we're in a positive place regarding that.
But perhaps those positive reports are not reflective of what happens across the piece entirely.
We've been going through difficult times recently. We find the same as Ashworth that we do have some difficult management teams. It's not the lower or the higher. It's actually the individual themselves rather than the actual position that we've been coming up against. But there's some misunderstandings with members and what the committee does, and managers and what the committee does, and that we've actually just been trying to reintroduce ourselves to the new chief executive of our trust to actually start a partnership working way in rather than them and us. But our members don't actually see all the work that we as a committee do on their behalf behind the scenes. There is a misunderstanding that we're not a prison service. We are actually NHS. And the way the NHS works is very, very different to the prison service. There's a lot more red tape and the policies and procedures are vastly different.
I don't want to lose sight of the branch organisation point of view. I mean, Lorraine, David, you were saying how you've got members across 247 sites. How on earth do you organise a branch meeting? How do you make democracy work, if you like, in that sort of environment?
We're at the moment trying to organise an indicative ballot. Never mind a branch meeting, just an indicative ballot. And it's taken 4 of us at least 7 hours apiece in the office trying to put together a regime that will allow us to get a ballot box to every site for every member as part of our facility time.
Yeah.
And we've just now been able to put the newsletter out this afternoon, and that's going to take 14 reps a week and a half to get that ballot done. And it's only an indicative ballot. If we were to look at a branch meeting, our branch meeting would have to be done over, I would say, over a week. And it would have to be done from 6:30 in the morning to 9:30 at night, and we just have to take the same branch meeting from site to site to site to make sure that every member gets an opportunity to have a voice, have an opinion, have a say, and also have an opinion about how the branch is working and how it's being run. We do rely very much on email and newsletters. They're like the backbone of us, and particularly hard copy newsletters, because when you're on a ward and you finally get a 30-minute break, and I say finally because the majority of us work 14 and 15-hour shifts. So when you get a 30-minute tea break, you don't want to go in the office and access your emails. You want to go and sit in a room somewhere quietly and drink a cup of tea. If we get a leaflet on that table with a newsletter, chances are a member will read the information on the newsletter because they're sat there. But if we rely completely on IT and do it all by email, then the majority of our members won't have the time or the energy to access that. And we also have members who won't have the skills to access that.
And we're the same at Rampton. Exactly the
much so.
same.
The advantages of a single site are clear in that set of circumstances.
It still has its challenges as well, because regarding the prison servers, they can have lockups meetings and stuff like that, and we can't. We're doing our meetings at handovers and stuff like that, so logistically it's still quite difficult to do, but not as challenging as down south, to be fair.
When we were getting all the information for the ballot, the postal ballot, there was 3 days where me and you were in the office, me and Karen were in the office, getting as much information as we could. I then had to use 4 days of my annual leave to actually finish it off, because all that information had to be in, and someone had to... There was that much information. If lots of us were trying to get it just got lost and confused. So for 4 days of my annual leave, I spent putting it all together for every single member that we had, and where they were, job titles and everything, to get it in so we could actually ballot.
And I was still emailing Martin at 12 o'clock at night, because I was getting all the information together, then sending it to Martin because he were on annual leave because I were on shift. And that's the way we worked.
My final email to head office with my ballot information about the membership, I think I sent from my home address at somewhere just before 1 o'clock in the morning. And that was something like day 6 that I've been, and don't get me wrong, I'm dead lucky as a branch chair because I've got a brilliant committee and they'll do whatever's asked of them. But that was everyone pulling the stops out. Everyone. And even when it was all over, we still had members phoning the office saying, I did not receive a ballot form.
At least they knew there was a ballot.
We were no different.
And
we were exactly the same.
It is quite strange for prison officers to understand why it took so long and so much time to do it, because within the NHS and within Mike Ashworth, the massive structures that we're dealing with, people change roles and bandings so quickly that you've got to keep up with that change, and it can change within days.
I had 100 changes within 48 hours of submitting my ballot information. I had 100 changes on the database.
The data, wasn't it? The data cleanse for the membership was such a huge undertaking.
It was massive.
Absolutely huge.
But of course, absolutely crucial, because if it moves from an indicative ballot to a statutory one, you've got to get it right.
I mean, one of the most common things we found with our ballot, with the data cleanse, was people who changed their name, didn't tell us they changed the name, and people who are off on long-term sick or maternity leave didn't tell us And I'm not saying when you go off on long-term sick, you're extremely ill. So the first thing you do is run to your POA and tell them, get off. But at some point, if you know that you're going to be off more than 3 or 4 weeks, make sure that you make that call, because a union is only as good as its membership.
Yeah.
Last question to all of you, and that is, if through that door walked not Mark Fairhurst and Steve Gillam, but Steve Barclay, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, what would you want to say to him?
I would say to you, everyone who takes a wage from health and social care owes the country a debt of kindness. And I would ask him to consider the people he believes he should be kind to.
And as someone once said, never forget to be kind, because it costs nothing.
I think there is a lack of empathy for the NHS from people in those positions. And that's stretching back for quite a number of years. There's literally no empathy. They use the NHS as a tool to get into power, but they've actually, when they've got the power, they've got no empathy for the NHS. They just see it as a black hole.
Or they see the NHS as a money-making mechanism. Yeah. And, you know, I'll give you, for the first year of COVID, England created 1 million millionaires. Mm-hmm. That had nothing to do with the millionaires that were already there. We actually created 1 million millionaires. And it'd be very interesting to see how much of that was on the back of NHS contracts for PPE that still sat on the Liverpool docks now.
Yeah, PCR testing.
You know, that was all out of date.
Any final thoughts before we wrap this up about what it means to be a POA rep? Karen?
I think, and this goes for all of us, and I think this is where we really need to give ourselves a pat on the back, is how much we do in our own time for nothing.
Yeah.
We're always doing stuff in our own time. You never go home and switch off if you're a POA rep. You've always got somebody wanting to ask you a question, and I'm sure everybody around this table is exactly the same. If they can answer them, whether it's 8 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, we all try to get back to our members, because when they need you now. If they've got something that's worrying them, they don't want to have to go to bed and not sleep because nobody's got back to them. And that's why we do this job, because we're passionate about looking after our members.
I mean, people tell you that being a POA rep is not an emergency service. And I'm not for 1 minute going to suggest that we are. But I am going to suggest that we're 24 hours, 7 days a week service. Mm-hmm. Because that's what our membership do.
My thanks to Alan, David, Gary, Karen, Lorraine and Martin. In our conversation, the question of support for POA representatives was raised. The union does have member support mechanisms in the form of a helpline and an online portal. Here is POA Deputy General Secretary Joe Simpson to tell us more.
We do have that for our members and also for our branch officials. The POA stress line has been up and running for quite a number of years. It is confidential. It offers immediate professional telephone support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The free phone number is 0800 107 6585. And once they say they are a POA member, they'll be able to access the service. If they're not happy speaking to somebody, we also have access to the Health Assured portal. If they don't want to obviously talk about the problems, that portal contains lots of wellbeing resources and emotional health support. Our members can access that through the POA website at www.healthassuredap.co.uk. And also, if members wish to have a look at it, the login details are also found on POA Circular 59 of 2020.
Thank you very much, Joe. And that phone number once again is 0800 107 6585. During the discussion, reference was made to how a high street coffee shop pays more than a qualified nurse, the issue of a 1 pence per hour pay rise for certain NHS grades, and the creation of 1 million millionaires in the UK during the COVID pandemic. You can find links to articles expanding on these stories in the supporting text for this episode on the POA website, the union's Facebook page, or platforms such as Spotify, where the podcast is published. And members voted to reject the government's pay offer in that indicative ballot, but not in sufficient numbers to cross the legal threshold for taking industrial action. The message from Alan, David, Gary, Karen, Lorraine and Martin is crystal clear. POA members in the NHS are a vital and valued part of the POA. But as is always the case, the strength of the union voice is directly connected to the health of the union's membership figures and accurate information on members' name, grade and contact details. So if you are not yet a member of the POA, sign up today by talking to your local POA representative or visiting poauk.org.uk, where you can find details of how to join and all the information you need on the work the union does in supporting its members. Thank you for listening. We hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.